Within the grand expanse of a royal palace inside a wide and ornate chamber, a woman named Origin sat beside her young daughter, Ellen. Her voice, soft and warm, wove the words of a beloved fairy tale, painting vivid images of an ancient kingdom where its people once lived amidst harmony and joy. Ellen listened intently as her mother's tale shifted from serenity to calamity. The day that peace was shattered by a ruthless invasion of monstrous beings. When the threat became dire, the king sought out his most powerful spirit, begging her to defend the people and aid the brave hero who had risen to lead the fight. Even with the spirit's strength bolstering him, the hero could not defeat every foe. Exhausted and desperate, he requested she unleash her full power at once. She complied, releasing an overwhelming surge of energy that eradicated the monsters entirely. The victory, however, came at a terrible price. The hero was gravely wounded. Unable to let him die, the spirit carried him into the spiritual realm, vowing to one day return him. The people waited with hope for his promised return, yet he never reappeared. Years later, the story was being told again. This time, in a different setting, a man gently cradled his young son while another woman concluded the same tale. The boy asked what had become of the hero. Alan, the storyteller, replied with absolute conviction that the hero had already returned. But the boy's father, Roville, interrupted brusquely, urging silence while he ordered kebabs from a street vendor. Ellen, watching Roville, asked when he would be home. His tired reply hinted that it would not be easy. With the kebabs in hand, Roville took his leave, unaware that recognition and danger was moments away. A voice in the crowd called out his name, prompting murmurs among the onlookers. Realizing the risk, Roville slipped through the bustling streets attempting to evade pursuit. Still, his pursuers closed in. He darted into a shadowed alley, believing he had found safety, only to encounter a dead end. Cornered, and with seconds to spare, Roville vanished in a sudden burst of teleportation, leaving his hunters wide-eyed and stunned. Breathless, he materialized beneath a secluded bridge. Soon after, Alan appeared, fixing her gaze on him and asking why he avoided everyone. He broke down, tears streaking his face, admitting in thought that during his absence, the world had shaped him into a hero, a role he could not reconcile with the flood of attention. Watching him cry, Ellen pondered the rumors of his long coma in the spirit's care, though the truth was far different. Origin's mother had helped Roville heal fully, and in time he and Origin fell in love, eventually marrying. Their bond transformed Roville into a half-spirit. Though his new powers were difficult to command, Origin trained him patiently until mastery returned, and together with Ellen, they rejoined the human realm. Ellen, perceptive and ever-curious, recognized that she too carried echoes of another life, once a Japanese scientist, devoted to experiments with elements and the pursuit of innovation. In this reincarnated body, she applied her knowledge toward honing magical abilities alongside her father. Roville grumbled about the inevitable commotion his teleportation powers would cause, but Ellen suggested simply speaking with people to clear up their questions. Roville recoiled at the thought of such direct attention. Their conversation was interrupted when a familiar figure appeared. Alberto, Roville's former lifeguard. Startled, Roville attempted to flee, but Alberto's firm hand halted him. Before introductions could be made, Roville, with a nervous smile, diverted attention to praising Ellen's talents. Alberto chuckled, agreeing that the young girl was indeed charming, and then revealed his purpose. Roville's entire family, the House of Duke Van Rave, awaited his return. The Duke's title, Alberto explained, had been bestowed upon them in honor of their victory over the monsters. Roville's younger brother Swabble currently led the house. Roville dismissed the need for his presence, but Alberto pressed on, warning that Swabble's husband, Agiel, was causing serious trouble. Agiel's name elicited a sharp reaction. She had been ordered by the royal family to marry Swabble, a union that brought no joy. Intrigued and simmering with restrained anger, Roville declared that he must meet this woman himself. Alberto, recognizing that his old friend's personality remained intact, relented. Ellen, however, was troubled by Roville's indifference to his family's plight. When he tried to explain himself, she retorted that she hated him. Stung, he pleaded with her to reconsider, promising to return home if she ceased her resentment. Ellen reluctantly agreed, and the group set off in a carriage toward the Von Rav mansion. En route, Ellen asked Alberto about Agiel's identity. Alberto described her as the second princess of Tenbol and Roville's former fiancé. She had treated their engagement as a favor to the hero, only to sever it without hesitation when she believed Roville would perish in battle. Years later, seeing Swabble elevated to Duke, she maneuvered to marry him instead. Alberto's tone darkened as he lamented Roville's absence, which had forced others to face the chaos she wrought. Agiel's extravagance had driven the family to the brink of bankruptcy. Before visiting the mansion, Roville chose to make a stop at a church. The priest, astonished to see him alive, listened as Roville requested the swift preparation of a wedding ceremony. He explained that urgency was essential, wishing to thwart Agile from approaching him with any proposals. When asked about the bride, Roville stated she would come from the spiritual realm. At his call, a radiant portal opened and Origin emerged, stepping directly into her husband's arms. Roville expressed regret for the simplicity of the ceremony, but Origin, smiling warmly, was unfazed. Origin smiled gently, saying she was simply happy to reunite with her beloved husband once more in the human world. Ellen watched the heartfelt scene with a radiant expression, her heart light and joyful, while the priest and Alberto stood speechless before the spectacle. Roville, sensing their astonishment, explained that his wife was a spirit, and that he himself had become a half-spirit to be with her. Origin offered a kind greeting to Alberto, who suddenly remembered seeing her centuries ago, battling alongside the hero on the front lines. When all preparations were complete, the priest invited the couple to exchange their vows. They gazed into each other's eyes, their expressions filled with tenderness and shared history, and accepted the union anew. After signing the ceremonial documents, Origin leaned forward and kissed Roville before everyone present. Moved by her parents' joy, Ellen lifted her hands and asked them to do the same. Though uncertain of her intent, they obeyed. Channeling her elemental energy, Ellen summoned the element of platinum, shaping it into 2 luminous bands that gently encircled her parents' ring fingers. She explained softly that this particular finger was directly connected to the heart, a symbol of love and eternal union. Concentrating further, she created 2 resplendent diamonds from pure carbon and set them onto the rings, crafting radiant crowns around the bands. As a final touch, she conjured a delicate shower of diamond dust that glittered through the air, completing the ceremony in a stunning display of brilliance. Overwhelmed with emotion, Roville and Origin felt a divine presence fill the church. A celestial light streamed through the ceiling as the goddesses of valor descended, blessing their sacred bond in the presence of both humans and spirits. The priest, awestruck, solemnly declared the marriage official. Ellen beamed proudly, her mastery of all elements now proven, while Alberto looked on in admiration, unable to believe a child could create something so extraordinary. Before leaving, Roville offered the remaining diamonds to the priest as an expression of gratitude. Alberto, still in awe, complimented Ellen, saying she looked impressive and radiant. The praise filled Roville with pride, though his goofy, adoring grin embarrassed his daughter, who turned away, torn between laughter and exasperation. Alberto, amused, congratulated the newlyweds once more. Roville thanked him, but his expression soon hardened. Turning to Origin, he asked her to take Ellen back to the spiritual realm for their safety, fearing that Agile might stir up trouble if she discovered their whereabouts. Ellen, puzzled by his sudden seriousness, sensed the worry in his eyes. He was determined to protect them at any cost, even if it meant separation. Roville assured her that she could still see him through a magical mirror, and Origin nodded in quiet understanding. Before leaving, Origin's tone darkened as she remarked that she longed to reduce Agile to ashes, a declaration that deeply unsettled Ellen, who was shaken by the fierce hatred her parents bore that woman. Roville, somber and resolute, told his daughter that Agile was their enemy, and expressed concern that the royal family might one day attempt to arrange a marriage for Ellen to strengthen political ties. Alberto scoffed at the absurdity of such a notion. She was still a child. But Roville insisted he could take no risks with someone so precious. When all was said, Origin bid farewell to her husband, as she and Ellen prepared to return to the spiritual plane. Roville walked toward the waiting carriage alongside Alberto, but paused midway, anxiety rising in his chest. Looking back at Origin, he struggled with the urge to stay. She met his gaze, her expression calm yet firm, and reminded him to remain strong and keep his promise. With one final look, he climbed into the carriage and departed. Mother and daughter soon entered the spiritual realm together, setting off in search of the magical mirror through which they could watch over Roville's journey. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Alberto sat deep in thought, his heart heavy with sympathy for his friend. Memories surfaced, of Agile's cruelty, her manipulation, and her marriage forced upon him by circumstance. Despite being wed, she had treated Roville with disdain and humiliation. Over time, her behavior grew unbearable, until the day the monsters attacked the city. The chaos provided Roville with the excuse he needed to escape their toxic union, claiming his life was at risk on the battlefield. Agile's fury was merciless. In retaliation, she ordered Roville and his aging father to the front lines as punishment. The old man perished in combat, and only through Origin's intervention did Roville survive, carried safely into the spiritual realm. As Alberto finished replaying those bitter memories, he turned to his friend and was struck by how profoundly Roville had changed. He pondered whether his time in the spirit world had finally helped him recover the happiness he had lost since the war. Folding his hands, Alberto silently apologized for his failure to stop Agil's tyranny, but Roville, aware of how malevolent she could be, absolved him instantly. He reminded Alberto that his loyalty had never wavered, and that guilt was a weight he need not bear. He admitted that he too shared responsibility for leaving matters unresolved, urging his friend to release his burdens alongside him. As their carriage rolled through the bustling streets, banners and flags bearing the emblem of the Bankra family fluttered from balconies and rooftops, celebrating the hero's long-awaited return. Watching the joyful crowd, Roville smiled sincerely for the first time in what felt like ages. When they reached the Van Rav mansion, a sea of people awaited at the gates. The grand doors swung open slowly, revealing rows of servants lined on either side of the path. The carriage came to a halt before the entrance. Stepping down, Roville and Alberto were greeted by thunderous applause. The hero's eyes softened as he expressed his gratitude, declaring how happy he was to see them again. At the doorway, the head butler and every maid bowed respectfully, offering words of thanks for his safe return. With composed formality, the butler invited him inside. Yet before they could take another step, an excited female voice echoed from the upper floor, announcing his return with unrestrained delight. A moment later, a woman came dashing down the grand staircase, so hurriedly in fact that she stumbled and tumbled down the steps like a rolling sack of potatoes. The butler, aghast, kept his composure, pretending not to notice his mistress's humiliating spill. Roville, stunned, stared in disbelief at the chaotic scene. He turned to the butler, silently asking for an explanation. With visible reluctance, the man revealed that the clumsy woman was none other than Lady Agil. Attempting to recover her dignity, she jumped up and tried to embrace Roville, arms outstretched, but he recoiled sharply, uncomfortable with both her behavior and her presence. His cutting remark that followed sent a wave of alarm through the servants, though Agil ignored it entirely. With a forced smile, she insisted that her father had compelled her to marry Roville's brother, and absurdly claimed the hero had now returned to claim her hand as his own. Roville met her delusion with cold detachment, making it unmistakably clear that no such thing would ever happen. Meanwhile, from the spiritual realm, Origin watched the confrontation unfold, fury kindling in her chest. Just as she prepared to intervene, Ellen's voice broke through, reminding her mother not to set the castle ablaze. Taking a steadying breath, Origin restrained herself and praised her daughter for her wisdom. Thus ended the first chapter of their story.